There's a specific kind of pounding on a front door that tells you two things in the same heartbeat. 1. Whatever dream you were having is dead on arrival, and 2. Somebody with a badge, a clipboard, or a violently overinflated sense of purpose is standing on the other side. It's not a knock, it's a statement. It's the sound of your Saturday getting repossessed. It was 8:15 a.m., bright but not fully awake yet, that weird soft suburban light where the sun looks like it's still deciding if it even likes this neighborhood. The kind of neighborhood where the lawns are the color of envy because they're basically fed chemicals and spite, and the silence is thick, like everybody's listening for you to slip up so they can report it. I was standing in my living room wearing taco print boxer briefs, holding a plastic bowl of Captain Crunch like a man who still believed in peace, when the pounding hit again and rattled the frosted glass on my door like it owed somebody money. "Coming, hold your horses," I yelled, spraying a little milk onto the hardwood as I hustled over, set the cereal down, kicked a stray sock under the couch like that would impress anyone, and unlocked the deadbolt. I swung the door open ready to tell off a solicitor, and the words just evaporated. 2 police officers stood on my welcome mat. One was older, eyes tired, face carved out of 1,000 disappointing calls, like he'd seen humanity at its most creative and had stopped being surprised years ago. The other was younger, jacked, and had his hand hovering near his belt in a way that made me suddenly very aware I was basically standing there in novelty underwear, defenseless except for sugary cereal breath. "Good morning," the older one said, and he didn't sound like he meant it. "Are you Mr. Mark Henderson?" "Depends," I said, leaning on the doorframe like I was not one gust of wind away from being featured in a neighborhood group chat. "Did I win the raffle at the fire station? Because if this is about that parking ticket from 2018, I swear I paid it online." The younger cop didn't blink. He pulled a small notepad out like he was about to record my confession to a crime against decency. "We received a complaint, Mr. Henderson. A 911 call, actually." "A 911 call." I stared at him. "Is my house on fire? Did I sleep through a gas leak?" "Regarding a peeping Tom incident," the older officer said, and his eyes drifted past me into my living room like he expected to see a telescope aimed at Narnia. "A neighbor reported a male subject standing in this living room using high-powered binoculars to stare into her master bedroom window for approximately 45 minutes. I looked at them. I looked down at my taco boxers. I looked back up. "You guys are joking," I said. "This is a prank. Is Dave in the bushes? Dave, come out, you idiot. This isn't funny." "There is no Dave," the young one said flatly, like he'd personally executed every joke in the county. "The complainant, a Mrs. Brenda Higgins, stated she made eye contact with you multiple times and that you were, quote, leering menacingly while holding a black surveillance device." Brenda. Of course it was Brenda. Brenda Higgins lived next door, and she treated the property line like it was the border between 2 warring nations. She once called the city because my recycling bin was 3 inches too far left. I'm pretty sure she alphabetized her spices. She looked like the kind of person who would iron jeans and then complain they wrinkled. "Officers," I said, rubbing my temples, "Brenda lives 70 feet away, across a drainage ditch and through a line of crepe myrtles. I can barely see her house from here, and with all due respect to neighborhood relations. Staring at Brenda is not how I want to start my Saturday, or end it, or spend any time in between." "She was very specific about the binoculars," the older cop said, and he sounded like a man who desperately wanted a donut and a world where people didn't call 911 for sport. "She said you were holding them up to your face, moving around crouching down to get a better angle." "Crouching," I repeated slow. He nodded. "To get a better angle." I held up a finger like I was about to solve a murder. Okay, I see what's happening. Do you guys want to see the binoculars?" The younger cop tensed immediately. "Sir, if you have a weapon." "It's not a weapon, Rambo," I snapped, stepping back. "Come in. Keep your boots on. I don't care. You have to see this to believe it." They entered like my living room was a hostage situation. And yeah, it wasn't pretty. Video game cases, empty soda cans, the bowl of cereal slowly turning into edible drywall. But right in the middle of the rug was the black surveillance device, the thing Brenda had transformed into a criminal conspiracy. I pointed at it like I was presenting evidence to a jury. "There, the smoking gun." The older cop squinted, stepped closer, and nudged it with the toe of his boot. "Is that a video game?" "It's an Oculus Quest," I said. "A VR headset. I was playing Beat Saber." They both stared like I'd started speaking dolphin. "It's a rhythm game," I explained, trying to maintain dignity in taco underwear, which, just so we're clear, is not a dignified outfit. You slash blocks with lightsabers to techno music. That's why I was crouching. I was dodging a virtual wall of neon blocks. That's why I was staring. I was trying to beat my high score. I wasn't looking at Brenda's curtains. The younger officer picked it up, turned it over in his hands, looked out the window toward Brenda's place, then back at me. Sarge, the blinds are closed. You can't even see the neighbor's house from this angle. Exactly. I threw my hands up like the universe was testing my patience for a science experiment. I was fighting for my life against a remix of Gangnam Style, not spying on the Wicked Witch of the West. The older cop exhaled, and it was the kind of sigh that comes from a person realizing his morning is going to be paperwork and nonsense instead of peace. He took off his hat, rubbed his forehead. So let me get this straight, you were dancing around in your underwear, blindfolded by a computer helmet, swinging at invisible blocks. Yes, I said. It's cardio. The younger one finally cracked, just a little smile, like his soul had been locked in a cabinet and someone had found the key. This is the third call from her this week, Sarge. Remember Tuesday? She said the mailman was a government drone. I remember, the sergeant muttered, already aging in real time. He looked at me again, and for a second his eyes softened from law enforcement to sympathetic dad. Look, Mr. Henderson, we have to follow up on calls. It's the law. But clearly there's no criminal intent here unless having bad rhythm is a felony. It should be, I mumbled. I missed a lot of notes. We'll go have a talk with Mrs. Higgins, he said, heading back toward the door. But do me a favor, maybe keep the blinds closed when you're doing your cardio. Just to keep the peace. Officer, I said, walking them out, I will nail the blinds shut if it means I never have to hear her name again. They left with that heavy clacking walk of two men, who already knew the next conversation would drain their will to live. I watched them cross the street toward Brenda's beige two-story, this joyless suburban fortress that looked like it had been designed by a committee that hated laughter. Her front door cracked open before they even knocked. She'd been watching. Of course she had. I closed my door, leaned my forehead against it, and felt that weird emotional whiplash, adrenaline turning into annoyance. I wasn't going back to sleep. The cereal was soggy. The vibe was murdered. So I threw on basketball shorts and a t-shirt, stepped out back, and breathed in the air like it might calm me down. My backyard wasn't huge, but it was mine, grill, sad hammock, a little patch of grass that existed solely so I could pretend I was thriving. But the problem was the sight line. Because of how the developers graded everything back in the 90s, Brenda's house sat slightly higher than mine. Her patio had this perfect view down into my yard, like she'd been gifted the tactical high ground by a petty god. There was no fence, just a line of patchy shrubs she refused to water, and I refused to touch because she'd probably accuse me of poisoning them. I stood there staring at her place, and right on schedule, like a demon summoned by HOA bylaws, she appeared. Her sliding glass door hissed open. Brenda stepped out wearing a floral bathrobe that looked like it had been ripped from a 1980s sofa. Her hair was in curlers, big pink ones, like aggressive little grenades. And she was holding garden shears, even though there was nothing to trim except the tension. She saw me, froze, then marched to the edge of her patio 4 feet above me like she was addressing peasants from a castle wall. You, she screeched. I saw you. I saw the police leaving. Did they arrest you? Did they take your pervert binoculars? Good morning to you too, Brenda, I shouted back, shielding my eyes from the sun. No, they didn't arrest me, because playing video games in my own living room isn't a crime yet. I'm sure you're working on that. Liar. She stabbed the air with the shears like she was fencing with my sanity. I was changing into my day clothes, and I felt it, a gaze. A dirty gaze. I looked out, and there you were with that black box strapped to your face, zooming in on me. Brenda, I said, stepping off the patio onto the grass, voice getting tight. It's virtual reality. I literally could not see the real world. That's the whole point. And honestly, that's a feature, not a bug. Don't get smart with me, you deviant. Her face turned a shade of red that fought with the pink curlers. I have grandchildren who visit. I can't have a predator monitoring my property. I'm calling the HOA. I'm calling the mayor. My nephew works for sanitation. He can have your trash cans confiscated. My trash cans. I laughed, and it came out darker than I meant. You're going to weaponize the garbage men? That's your master plan. I want you to stop looking at me, she screamed, stomping her slippered foot. Every time I look out, I see you lurking. I live here, I shouted, and something in me finally snapped clean, like a dry twig. I'm existing in my own home. If you don't want to see me, close your blinds. I shouldn't have to hide in my own home, she shrieked. You are the nuisance. You're the blight. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you are, a peeping Tom, a voyeur. And that's when I realized something terrifying. She wasn't just mad, she was committed. She had invented an entire storyline where I was obsessed with her, because that story made her the main character, the victim, the hero, the martyr, everything. I took a breath, and my voice went low and calm in a way even I didn't recognize. You know what, Brenda, you're right. You shouldn't have to see me. And I definitely do not want to see you. Then move, she spat. No, I said. I'm not moving, but I am going to fix this. Her eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you, I said, turning away. Be careful what you wish for. I have eyes everywhere, she yelled after me. Inside, I cracked a soda, hands shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of suburban warfare going nuclear. Then I sat down at my computer and did something I never, ever thought I'd do voluntarily on a weekend. I started reading zoning codes. Not TikTok, not Netflix. City statutes, HOA covenants, 70 pages of dry legal jargon about setbacks, easements, material requirements, the kind of writing that makes you feel like your brain is being sanded down. And then I found it, buried in some ancient subclause from 1974, like a forgotten cheat code. Residential perimeter fences were limited to 4 feet, but freestanding, artistic installations, or windbreak structures intended to protect soil integrity on properties adjacent to drainage nuisance lots could extend up to 10 feet, as long as they didn't obstruct public roads. 10 feet. I pulled up the city survey map, zoomed in, and saw the jagged red line behind Brenda's property. Zone D. Drainage nuisance runoff. I stared for a second and smiled. It was slow. It was ugly. It was the smile of a man who just discovered the universe still had rules, and some of them could actually be used against the people who hide behind rules. Brenda lived on a nuisance lot, and because her runoff flowed toward my yard, I had legal grounds to build a windbreak structure. Not a fence, art. 10 feet of art. I printed it, highlighted it like I was cramming for an exam, and then I called the exact opposite of an HOA-approved fence company. I called a guy my buddy had once described as a contractor who doesn't ask permission, he asks where you want the bodies. Yeah, a gravelly voice answered. Is this Tony? I asked. Who's asking? My name's Mark, I said. I have a neighbor who accused me of being a peeping Tom because I was playing VR. She's blasting opera at my house and has cameras aimed at my kitchen. I found a loophole in city code. I have a budget and I have a desire for revenge. There was a long pause, then the soft flick of a lighter, a deep exhale. I'm listening, Tony said. I need a 10-foot wall, I told him. But legally it's a windbreak and an art piece. Tony chuckled, and it was the warm sound of a man who enjoys chaos like it's a hobby. Kid, for a neighbor like that, we can go 10 feet. We can go reinforced. When do you want to start? Yesterday. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. Put the coffee on. I like it black like my soul. Tony arrived in a matte black F-350 that looked like it had survived a war. The exhaust pipe was the size of a cannon. He stepped out shaped like a vending machine. Wide, square, solid, boots, stained jeans, shirt that said OH. I asked that a rule. Like it was a personal insult. He didn't shake my hand. He just nodded and marched into my backyard, stared up at Brenda's house like it was a target. That the problem? He asked, pointing with an unlit cigar. That's her. He looked at the drainage ditch. Runoff. When it rains, my yard turns into a swamp. I said, which was a lie, but a morally justified one. Good, Tony said. Structural necessity. That's the magic phrase. And the next 3 days were a blur of glorious, chaotic construction. Post holes, concrete, pressure-treated beams, nail guns popping like freedom. Tony brought a crew of 3 silent dudes who looked like they were on day release from a Viking reenactment society. They didn't speak. They just carried lumber and drank energy drinks like it was holy water. Brenda lost her mind the moment the flatbed delivery backed into my driveway, beeping loudly. What is this? She screamed at the property line. You can't do this. This is a residential neighborhood. Tony walked over, towering over her like a bouncer at the world's worst club. Ma'am, step back. Construction zone. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, Tony said, finally lighting his cigar. Ask for Sergeant Miller. And she did call. The same tired officers showed up, looked at the permit Tony taped to my back door, looked at the highlighted statute, looked at Brenda vibrating like a kettle about to scream. "It checks out, ma'am," the officer said, in the tone of a man making peace with the collapse of civilization. "He has a permit for a windbreak structure." "A windbreak?" Brenda shrieked. "There is no wind." "Preparing for hurricane season," Tony deadpanned. "We live in Ohio," she snapped. Tony shrugged. "Weather's crazy these days." 10 minutes later she turned the hose on, spraying water over the line, aiming for the fresh concrete like she was baptizing my revenge. "Just watering my plants," she yelled. Tony picked up a sheet of plywood like a medieval shield and deflected it without flinching. "Keep it coming, lady. Cures the concrete faster." By Friday the posts stood 10 feet tall, huge, heavy, casting long shadows into Brenda's precious yard. Her little petunia bed, the one she babied like a child, was suddenly living in permanent dusk. By Saturday sunset, the wall was finished, cedar facing my side so it looked gorgeous and clean, and on her side, raw plywood like the backside of a decision you regret. I stood on my patio with a beer and realized something beautiful. I couldn't see her windows. I couldn't see her cameras. I couldn't see her face. Tony clapped my shoulder. "She's done," he said. "But we ain't finished. You said art." I smiled. "Yeah, art." And that's where the twist happened, the part that turned this from a fence into a legend. Because I didn't call a decorator. I called a local muralist named Snake, a guy who got paid by the city to paint over graffiti, but secretly was the best graffiti artist in 3 counties. "Snake," I said when he answered, "how do you feel about painting a masterpiece?" "What's the canvas?" 10 feet tall, I said. 40 feet wide. And it belongs to the devil. "What's the subject?" "I want an eye," I said. A giant, realistic, bloodshot eye staring right at her. "And I want the pupil so detailed you can see the reflection of her soul in it." Snake paused, then laughed softly. "Oh, I can make it look wet." "Make it look wet," I said, grinning like a supervillain. Sunday morning, Snake set up scaffolding on the Brenda side. Still my property, because we built the wall 6 inches inside the line. Legal as church on Easter. Brenda came out, looked up at the plywood, and for the first time her voice wasn't angry, it was shaky. "You can't leave this," she said. "It blocks my sun. It lowers my property value." "It's a windbreak, Brenda." I called down from the ladder like I was announcing a weather report. "And don't worry, we're beautifying it. It's art." "Art?" she repeated, suspicious. "Dedicated to neighborhood watchfulness," I said. "Since you love watching so much, I figured you'd appreciate it." Snake worked fast, like he was possessed. Charcoal outline, then paint, layer after layer, until that I was horrifyingly real. 8 feet wide. Electric blue iris. Red-veined white. A pupil so dark it looked like a hole punched through reality, and inside that pupil, Snake painted a tiny distorted reflection of Brenda's own house, like the eye was literally staring into her. When it was done, Brenda stepped out, looked up, and screamed. Not a normal scream. This was the sound of a psyche snapping like a rubber band. She dropped her tea mug. It shattered. She clutched her chest. "It's demonic. It's looking at me. It's art, Brenda," I shouted from behind my wall, safe and smug. "It represents the duality of man, the gaze of the observer." "Take it down." "Now you know how I felt," I yelled back. "Just close your blinds, Brenda. If you don't want to see it, close the blinds." The HOA called an emergency meeting that Tuesday. The community center basement was packed. People who'd never shown up for anything in their lives came just for the drama. Brenda stood at the podium trembling, holding a printed photo of the eye like it was evidence in a murder trial. "It is satanic," she wailed. "It is harassment. He built a spite fence." The board turned to me, and the HOA president, this guy named Dave, looked like he was fighting a smile. Later I found out why Brenda once measured his grass with a ruler and reported him for being visually negligent. "Mr. Henderson," Dave said, coughing into his fist like he was hiding laughter, "is this structure compliant?" "It is not a fence," I said, sliding the permit across the table like I was dealing poker. "It's a windbreak structure, an artistic installation under city code. The artwork is a modern piece titled The Neighbor's Burden. Protected speech." Dave scanned the paperwork, glanced at the photo of the eye, then at Brenda vibrating in rage. "Well," he said slowly, "the paperwork seems to be in order." Brenda looked like she might levitate. "However," Dave added, raising a hand, "we do have guidelines about intensity." "Mr. Henderson," Would you be willing to modify the mural slightly to soften the gaze? I paused like I was considering mercy. Then I nodded. For the good of the community, sure. The next day I had Snake come back. We're changing it? He asked, confused. We're complying, I said. They want it softened. Snake grinned. How? Give it eyelashes. Snake laughed so hard he almost fell off the crate. And then he painted long, luscious, cartoonish eyelashes onto a bloodshot demonic eye, which somehow made it worse. Now it looked like a drag queen having a nervous breakdown. It was truly deeply unsettling. Brenda never complained again. She stopped using her patio. She hung blackout curtains. She planted fast-growing trees like she was trying to build her own escape route from my wall. The opera stopped. The cameras disappeared. The neighborhood got quiet. A month later, I sat on my porch at sunset, looking at the warm cedar glow on my side of the wall, drinking a beer, feeling this calm settle into my bones. And I realized something I didn't expect. The law isn't always justice. Sometimes it's just a tool, cold, neutral, sitting on a shelf, waiting for whoever has the time, the patience, and the stubbornness to learn how to swing it. Brenda tried to use power the way small people always do, through paperwork, fear, and public shame, and the moment she couldn't control the story anymore, she collapsed. Because that's what a lot of bullies are, really not strong, just loud, until someone figures out the rules better than they do. I slipped my VR headset on, fired up Beat Saber, picked the hardest song I could handle, and started swinging my lightsabers in the living room like a man who'd just reclaimed his oxygen. They say good fences make good neighbors. I muttered to the empty room, ducking and slashing to the beat, but a 10-foot spite wall with a giant eyeball that makes for a quiet life. And for the first time in years, I danced like nobody was watching. Because thanks to Brenda's own paranoia, and my beautiful little loophole, nobody was. Now here's the question that still messes with me: did I deliver justice? Or did I just out-crazy the crazy and call it karma? If you were in my shoes, would you have built the wall, would you have painted the eye, or would you have taken the high road and let someone like Brenda keep policing your life from behind her curtains? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me where you think the line is between self-defense and revenge, and if you've ever had a neighbor, an HOA, or a petty tyrant try to run your world. I want to hear that story too.